Hey, everybody. Thank you for being on today. My name is Justin Beelan. I'm the Director of Government Affairs at the American Orthotic and Prosthetic Association. Greatly appreciate everybody taking the time today to listen into what we're doing in terms of advocacy on the Hill. This is the first of what I hope will be many monthly advocacy webinars. We've got one scheduled for next month and the month after. Some of the busiest times in DC is right before the August recess and then right after the August recess. So we will have a lot to talk about. AOPA staff are working with Congress and the administration on a number of fronts, and I'm happy to be able to talk about just some of our efforts. Today, I'm going to be dealing with specifically our work on the Hill, the congressional side of things. So while, as you know, we have numerous issues on which we're working with the Centers for Medicare and Medicaid Services, or CMS, the Department of Health and Human Services, HHS. I just try to make sure I'm not engaging in DC speak by using nothing but acronyms and not explaining what those are. You guys know all those, but just in case. But today I'll be talking more about the legislative side of things. But our full team is here, so if you have questions about regulatory issues as well, please feel free to ask those. You can ask questions through the chat box on the screen at any time, and I will also be pausing for questions as we go through this. So please do ask questions as we go along. So like you, we're dealing with a new reality in DC. Just as your businesses have changed, we've had to change things up with my job as well. I haven't been on the Hill at all since March 16th. It's the longest I've gone without being on Capitol Hill in the 22 years that I've lived in Washington. It's very strange to be doing all these Zoom meetings and phone calls and things remotely. It's not unpleasant to not have to put on a suit. I'm not complaining about that. If you could see what I look like right now, you'd know that I need a haircut. I am complaining about that a little. But I'm working from home and most congressional staff are working from home. It's a ghost town up on the Hill, so there's no one to meet with even if we could. So that is what we are all facing. Time was that we would be able to go up and do our thing. That is our board member, Jim Weber, and his wife from our policy forum last year. Enjoying the site. It's a bit of a cloudy day up there, but it was always nice to be up on the Capitol. And of course, we had in-person meetings all the time. This is Senator Mark Warner of Virginia, one of our great champions. Another one of our champions, Senator Tammy Duckworth, along with Eve Lee, our executive director. The Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and of course, we're a bipartisan organization, so we were meeting with the Democratic leader and the Republican leader, that being Kevin McCarthy, along with Rick Riley, one of our board members. And one of our best champions, Anna Eshoo, who is chair of the subcommittee on health and the Energy and Commerce Committee, which has jurisdiction over many issues. And so that's how we used to do it in the old days. This is how we do it now. Very much the same people, but we're all Zooming. So there's Anna Eshoo. There's Leader McConnell. Again, we're a bipartisan organization. We're meeting with everybody. The good thing about it is we get to meet with a lot of different people at the same time. We weren't able to pull a bunch of members of Congress together at the same time back in the old days because of scheduling issues. So this is Lucy McBath, Representative Stephen Horsford of Nevada, and Representatives Colin Allred and Mark Vesey, both of Texas. So to be able to get everybody on the Zoom and have it be more of an informal thing, that's kind of a nice aspect of this. I'm not going to lie. And then this was just yesterday. Again, Leader McCarthy. Being at home and having all this time for Zooms, we get to meet a lot of the young guns. So the guy on the far left of your screen is Madison Cawthorn, who is going to be the next member of Congress for the 11th District of North Carolina. So yeah, it's good to meet with a lot of the young guns that are coming up on the Hill as we do this. So, but all this to say, things have drastically changed in the way we do our government relations. What has not changed is the fact that we are working as hard as we can to represent our industry. I am very proud to represent the O&P industry on the Hill. I am very passionate about it and the work that you're doing, especially during this pandemic, because I've just heard so many stories and seen so many pictures of people going above and beyond throughout this pandemic. So it has been a great honor to serve you and be your voice on the Hill as we go through this. So let's talk about what Congress has been doing specifically on COVID to this point. There has been a lot, and there still is a lot in the news today as the Senate works on their bill. We'll talk about more specific issues to the O&P community a little later in the presentation, but I think it is worth reviewing where we all are on what Congress has done specifically for COVID. The first thing that's worth noting is that O&P practices are considered essential businesses. This was one of the first things we did back in March as things began shutting down, ensuring that practices could stay open, as of course the vital work that you're doing needs to go on. Some rules vary state to state, especially these days. It's gotten murkier as time has gone on, what is allowed to be open, what is not allowed to be open, especially as states reopen, shut back down, and it can be confusing. So, but from the federal government's perspective, O&P is an essential business, and therefore they are offering help to ensure that you can stay open and do your job safely and protect your patients. And that has been the way it has been since the start of this pandemic. Congress has passed several bills, as I'm sure you have heard about, dealing with different aspects of coronavirus relief. Early on, it was initial support, vaccine development. At the time, we were not aware of how bad this would get, how long it would last. And so it was about preventing spread, that initial COVID-1 bill. The second bill emphasized paid leave, unemployment, and we're coming back to that in the next bill that they're doing right now, and we'll come back to that. Phase 3 was the CARES Act, which is of particular interest to us as it included two of the most important legislative pieces to date for O&P businesses. The CARES Act, as you know, had $50 billion in stimulus payments that went directly to fee-for-service entities. It created the Paycheck Protection Act, in which there has been two phases, one for $349 billion, all of which is gone. $321 billion was the second phase, and there's about $100 billion of that left, and we will come back to talking about that in a little bit, because what they can and can't do with that bill is being discussed for the next Senate package. And there was an additional $75 million for healthcare providers that was spread primarily to hard-hit areas, but that money is also still being distributed. So the CARES Act was back in March, and then it was updated again in April. Let's talk quickly about the Paycheck Protection Act. I don't want to spend too much time on this because AOPA has done a couple of webinars on this previously. You can go back and watch those, and you can certainly reach out to me or any other AOPA staff with specific questions. But just going over real quickly what's been done. Again, there was initial round of $349 billion in the Paycheck Protection Act. It was then refilled with about $321 billion more, and again, there's about $100 billion of that left, which is somewhat surprising because the first round of money went so fast, and frankly, because so many of those folks shouldn't have gotten that money in the first place. It's a little surprising that what's left is quite a big pot of money. Congress has put language in to ensure that $60 billion of this money, that second round of funding, will go through banks that don't normally do small business administration loans. So they've opened it up to businesses that are in smaller areas, more rural areas, I should say, underserved areas, to ensure that more folks have access to that money. Despite that, there were a lot of people that thought they would have access to it that didn't get it, and that's one of the things that they're trying to correct in the next round of tinkering with the Paycheck Protection Act. We're going to talk a little bit about the position. Well, actually, let's just skip right to that slide now. Well, actually, we'll get back to that in a minute. Sorry. So let's talk about what's coming next, which is the next round of funding. So Marco Rubio, specifically Senator from Florida, wants to make sure that that $100 billion is going to smaller businesses in targeted areas. He has said that he wants it to target businesses which are under 300 employees, which is, of course, a lot of the businesses that are our members. The revised program will also, will almost definitely extend the use of the loan. So if you've already got one, your term has probably already been extended. And if you haven't gotten one yet and you're thinking about going for one in this next round, it will probably be 6 months before you, it'll let you stretch out the time that you're using the bill. I can say that for me, I know Joe McTurnan's on this call as well. He and I, between us, probably chatted with at least 100 or so AOPA members. And the question we got, we helped, guide people through the application process and whether or not this was right for them. The comment we kept hearing was, well, in April and May, I don't really need this money. I'm pretty solvent for right now. But if this goes on, come August, I'm going to need this money. I'm going to need to make sure that this is still there to make sure that I'm able to stay open and keep running at my current levels. And so obviously we're very, very close to the month that everybody was mentioning. And so Congress is working to make sure that you don't have to, you wouldn't have to have expended all that money by the end of this month or next month, and in the next round that you've got 6 months to spend it. So they have heard you, they have heard us. We have advocated for more lenient terms in terms of using that loan. And of course, I think as most people know, HHS isn't really expecting, and the SBA isn't expecting any of this money to be paid back. By and large, these are, I put loans in quotation marks deliberately at the top of the screen because this is highly unlikely to be paid back. As long as you're keeping tabs on what you're doing with the money, as long as you're using it to keep your doors open, it's entirely likely that you will not be asked to pay any of these funds back. The other aspect of this was provider relief. I'll start by saying that even if you received, I've gotten this question quite a few times, even if you received a provider relief fund through HHS, you are still eligible for paycheck protection to apply for the Paycheck Protection Program. You can do both. In fact, both HHS and the SBA recommended that small businesses go after as much funding as they could get just to make sure that they were able to stay afloat. So many of our members received the first payment. You see on your screen, there was an initial 30 billion. Many of our folks received that automatically. There was then an additional 20 billion that was released, which required more of a proactive application. You had to have received money in the initial tranche of funding and then go back in and say what you would use that extra money for. The application period for that extra money closed late last month, but this is another area where Congress may re-up, depending on how long the public health emergency lasts. I would not expect any additional provider relief funding in the next bill. Around DC, we're calling it COVID-5, but there is likely to be definitely one more, but probably two more COVID bills before this public health emergency is over. I would assume that come September or October, there will be another round of provider relief. Simply because this seems like it's going to go on a while. So they're going to make sure that they're doing what they can. Don't hold me to that, please. Don't wait for an email that says you're getting it. I am prognosticating, but I would be surprised if they didn't add more money to this pool at the rate we are going. Again, you should have, if you were eligible for this, you likely received it automatically. I know there were a lot of I don't want to say issues because folks did get their money, but there was a lot of folks who thought they would receive theirs by direct deposit who ended up getting a check. Sometimes that check was sent somewhere that they weren't expecting. But by now, the number of emails, at least I'm receiving, and phone calls on this has dwindled precipitously. So I think folks have either gotten their money or do not expect to get money. That said, if you have questions about this, please reach out to me, or there is a number on your screen, which I have found, and I know that folks I have talked to have found, to be very, very helpful. A lot of times when there are government programs like this, you get an 800 number or something like that, where you don't receive the best help. I have heard nothing but good things about that number and being able to get answers. So hopefully that brings us up to speed on where we have been with COVID. And before we open this part up to questions, let's talk about where we're going next, because as I said, Congress is working almost full-time right now on whatever the next package is going to look like. So the House back in May passed a $3.5 trillion bill. This bill, if I may go into Washington wonkiness for a little bit, it's kind of what they call a Christmas tree. Anybody who wanted something within bounds of reason in that bill, as long as it was directly COVID related, usually got what they wanted. The reason they did it this way is they basically thought, and when I say they, I'm saying Nancy Pelosi, who was who, regardless of what your personal opinion on her might be, whatever your political affiliation is, she is a brilliant legislative tactician, as is Mitch McConnell. Nancy knew that if you packed that bill with everything, she would get something out of it in the Senate bill. So the three things she really wanted was aid for state and local governments. She wanted additional relief to underserved communities, and well, there are a few other things. It's almost not relevant. But she knew that if you pack it with everything, you'd get something. So it was never, that House bill was never intended to be passed in the Senate. They knew it was not going to pass. They filled it with as much as they could fill it, and then are going to make their argument, or are making their argument with the Senate as to what should be in there. So that's where we are today. You've probably read this week that Trump, with his proxy, Steve Mnuchin, has been on the Hill talking with Senate Republicans. Kevin McCarthy and Mitch McConnell were both in the White House on Monday, talking about what they'd all like to see in the next bill. Trump and now McConnell both want direct payments to people, to taxpayers, just like they had in the first round of funding. Folks got their $1,200 checks. They are thinking about doing something like that again. Renewing the federal unemployment benefits that were in the original bill. The federal government provided $600 a month in federal unemployment. That is winding down at the end of this month. Republicans have already said that's something that they would like to see in the next bill. Certainly Democrats want to see that in the next bill. So I think that you'll, if I may, again, go Washington wonky, you're seeing a lot of things in the news about kind of arguments back and forth between Republicans and Democrats. There was something interesting that happened yesterday in a Senate meeting that I think is telling about how this bill is shaping up, and that is that Rand Paul, and folks know that name, who is a libertarian, usually votes Republican from Kentucky, and is a very, very fiscal conservative, in as much as you can be a fiscal conservative in DC these days, walked out of a meeting of the Republican caucus basically livid about how much money they were going to be spending on the next bill. Pelosi obviously passed a $3.5 trillion bill. McConnell has said his was limited to at most $1 trillion. But the things that Rand Paul was saying lead you to believe that the Senate is probably aiming much, much higher than $1 trillion, probably spending it on different things than the House passed bill would spend it on. But you can imagine there's a lot in there. So without getting into specific programs that they're funding, you can probably guess that there's going to be a lot of money spent on this next bill. For a couple of reasons. One, people need the help. For starters, there are a lot of people who are taking advantage of that $600 federal unemployment benefit. And two, it would be naive of me to say that there is not a level of just being political in that. This is an election year. There's a lot of red state Republicans that are up for re-election that are having a bit of a harder time than they thought. They can't go home for their August recess. And I'll say Congress is in for this week, next week, and the week after. They're in for the next 3 weeks, and then they're home for a month. And that happens every year. That's not unusual. It happens every August. They really can't go home in August and have town hall meetings via Zoom with their constituents without having provided some level of coronavirus help. It would be a terrible look, and they know they can't do it. So part of it is political, part of it is absolute necessity. But when this Senate bill finally comes to fruition, I think you will probably see that it is, I'm not going to say closer to the $3.5 trillion House bill, but certainly further away from the $1 trillion that McConnell had initially talked about. I will pause there and just see if there's any questions. I know that's a lot, and we'll go into some of our specific issues in the next part of this, but did want to stop there, see if people had any questions on where we are or where we're going with COVID, paycheck protection, any of that.
Hi, Justin. This is Ashley. You don't currently have any questions in the queue directly related to the content, so you can keep rolling.
Perfect. Thank you. And if anybody does have any of those questions, please do reach out to me. My email address will be back up at the end. It was great to get to know so many folks as we were going through the Paycheck Protection and the Provider Relief Fund. I got to talk to a lot of folks I hadn't ever talked to before, so it was really great. And so happy to do that as we go on. Again, there's not any sign this pandemic is slowing down, so I expect this sort of thing from the congressional level will be going on, so happy to help. Let's talk more about specific issues that we're working on, and we're not out of the COVID woods actually yet, because we're going to talk about some of the things that AOPA specifically is looking for in the next round of COVID funding. First thing I want to talk about is the Medicare Orthotics and Prosthetics Patient-Centered Care Act. Now, if you have been on our policy forum, if you open our emails, you'll know that this particular piece of legislation has been a huge, not a huge lift, it's something we've needed to do. It's been our biggest policy priority, the facets of this bill, for some time. We have a House bill, HR 5262. We'll talk more about that in a minute. But let's talk about what our priorities were and what we wanted this bill to do. And I am going to do something for the next few slides that frankly I normally hate to do. I'm going to put a whole bunch of words on the screen and more or less read them to you. That's the worst kind of presenting, I know, but the level of minutia in this legislation that we've crafted, it's better to spell it all out and put it all on the screen rather than have me listen to it. So we want to statutorily distinguish orthotists and prosthetists from suppliers of durable medical equipment. As all of you know, we are lumped in with DME, and that doesn't, it creates problems that I'm going to go into in much more detail on the next slide. We want to restore the definition of off-the-shelf orthotics in Congress's intended meaning of minimal self-adjustment. Congress had a meaning of self-adjustment, which literally said that it's something that can be adjusted by the patient themselves with minimal difficulty. I mean, it's right there in the words. CMS, on the other hand, expanded their definition, this definition of minimal self-adjustment, to include any orthotics which can be adjusted not only by the patient themselves, but by a caregiver or supplier. Only in DC will you have a definition of self-adjustment that includes other people. It didn't make a heck of a lot of sense. So we wanted language in this bill to ensure that minimal self-adjustment means exactly what those words have always seemed to mean in the English language, which is adjustments that you can make on your own without any help to ensure that you are using your equipment correctly. We want to, within bounds of reason, prohibit drop shipment of orthoses and prostheses to patients. As you know, there was a huge DOJ bust last year but that uncovered $1.2 billion in Medicare fraud of companies using late night advertising and cold phone calls to reach out to Medicare beneficiaries and send them devices that they probably didn't need and maybe didn't know how to use, even if they did. So it took us a long time to hone in on language to ensure that we could prohibit this from happening. But I think we were successful in that, and that's a huge part of the bill. Exempt orthotists and prosthetists from competitive bidding requirements. We'll talk more about that in just a minute. So here's where we currently stand. And again, I apologize, I'm basically reading what's on the screen, but I think that's, it'll be better for everyone to just kind of see it all spelled out. Congress and CMS already treat O&P differently from durable medical equipment. There is a separate statutory coverage. Many orthoses are statutorily exempt from competitive bidding. All of this is in place right now. And again, you know, and that last point is important. Historically, O&P fee schedule adjustments applied separately from DME fee schedule adjustments. So there is a certain level of separation, which is helpful. However, it is worth noting, if I can advance my slides here, that there is a perception that O&P is a subset of DME, and this does negatively impact our profession. We are viewed as suppliers of equipment, not practitioners. And that is something, frankly, when I'm on the Hill, that members of Congress and their staff just can't seem to wrap their brain around. They'll say, well, you guys can work with the same patient for, you know, months, if not years, and, you know, work with them on not one prosthesis, but numerous prostheses over the course of a person's life. How are you just seen as suppliers of that and not, you know, caregivers, not people who are providing necessary care? And that is simply because we're viewed as a subset of DME. So we want to make sure that that distinguishing of O&P from DME is in place so that we can be completely separate and protect patients by differentiating that, you know, that extra level that we go to. We're not just handing them some piece of equipment, as opposed to commodity-based nature of DME, which in most cases is just giving someone that piece of equipment. So if Congress doesn't know that, if CMS doesn't know that, obviously it's vital that we pass this piece of legislation and this language to ensure that we're getting that message across. So that is the biggest provision of, well, not the biggest, it's one of the provisions that you saw, probably the most important to us anyway, probably to our field, at least in the conversations that I've had. And the one we definitely want to get across the finish line. Again, a bunch of words on your screen for which I apologize, but at the end of the day, we want to make sure that Congress knows, that CMS knows that we are not simply suppliers of DME. I've got 7 slides in here. I know they all say the same thing, but I think it speaks to the importance of this. And this last slide is, the last bullet here is particularly important and has been an argument that has resonated strongly during the pandemic. We obviously can't bill for telehealth. I know that all of you are doing increasingly more telehealth so that your patients don't have to come to your practice. I know that a lot of folks are going to people's homes and making house calls to fit cranial helmets and things like this, and doing a lot of work by telehealth. We obviously can't bill for telehealth because we bill for products. We don't bill for services. So when Congress started expanding and CMS started expanding waivers for telehealth to, for example, PTs and OTs, I was reached out to by several members of Congress and their staff saying, well, is this something you guys are in favor of? Is this something you guys support? And we had to say, well, yeah, but for the sake of patients everywhere, but to us, it frankly doesn't matter all that much. We're doing more telehealth because we have to. It's the best way to provide care to our patients while ensuring that they stay safe, but it doesn't matter because we can't bill for it. And so that kind of blew a lot of staffers away. They were really, really surprised. And so we started realizing that this was a strong argument we could make for Congress to statutorily separate O&P from DME. We spearheaded a letter signed by 5 members of Congress, and I'll show their names in just a second. This went to Alex Azar and Seema Verma, which basically said to CMS and HHS, look, they're doing this work. There is no reimbursement for non-repair services. We've got to find a way to make this happen during this pandemic as telehealth use in O&P is skyrocketing. And this was again signed by a bipartisan group of 5 members of Congress. We had a very, very limited window to get this letter done. So 5 may not seem like that many, but when you've got 5 bipartisan members of Congress, 4 of whom sit on a committee that oversees the work that CMS is doing, CMS pays attention. So again, we had a limited window. It would have been more, but getting 5, especially those on the relevant committee, was huge. So we got, like I said, a lot of buy-in from Congress in terms of using the argument of telehealth to distinguish O&P from DME. We'll continue to make that argument as we go through the next phase of COVID. And let's talk about those next steps. There will be, the bill that we've been talking about, the Patient-Centered Care Act, is a House bill, HR 5262. We have 10 co-sponsors on that bill, bipartisan. It's firmly bipartisan. What we have not had to date is a Senate companion. And to go kind of, again, I'm going to get wonky on you. This bill was introduced in the Senate in the last Congress by Senator Charles Grassley of Iowa. He is now the chairman of the Committee of Jurisdiction. He's the chair of the Senate Finance Committee. When this bill got introduced in the last Congress, it was referred to the Senate Finance Committee. Chuck Grassley, as any member of Congress, Republican or Democrat, knows it's a bad look to introduce a bill that you know is going to get referred to your own committee. It's viewed as self-dealing a little bit. So Senator Grassley couldn't introduce it, but he is firmly in favor of it, but he just said, I can't do it. This being a crazy election year, it took us a while to find someone who would latch onto it and really run with it as a Republican. Senator Mark Warner, whose picture you saw earlier, was always on board. He was the Democratic lead in the last Congress. He's the Democratic lead in this Congress. So we always had a staunch Democratic supporter. Tammy Duckworth will be on the bill as well, another staunch Democratic supporter. We just couldn't find a Republican lead. Senator John Cornyn of Texas said, yep, love to be on it, but I can't be the person who's going to introduce it on the floor, make speeches, really rally the troops. Senator Bill Cassidy, Republican from Louisiana, same thing. Yep, I'm on board. Love the bill, love what it'll do. I just don't have the bandwidth with everything else going on, and especially now with COVID, to be that leader. So Senator Steve Daines of Montana stepped up and said he will take on this bill. So Senator Steve Daines and Mark Warner, as well as Senators Duckworth, Cassidy, Cornyn, and likely, not officially, but likely Senator Tammy Baldwin of Wisconsin will all be on this bill when it gets introduced in about 2.5 weeks. We are putting the finishing touches on what that bill will look like, running it through the proper channels. By and large, in most cases, you can't just pop out a bill, and especially in the Senate, you have to make sure that it meets a lot of legal parameters. You have to make sure that committee staff and the lawyers have gone over it, making sure it doesn't do anything illegal, obviously, making sure that the stuff that it purports to do, it can do. So that's where we are in that process right now. But the week of August 3rd will be the week that that bill drops. You will see a lot of communications from us when that bill comes out, urging you to write to your senators for co-sponsorship and getting them on board. So that is the next step, and it is a big step. Having a bill in both the House and the Senate is very, very important to making sure we get this bill over the finish line, one way or the other. And thank you to everybody who has already helped in this effort. I know that's a lot of folks. There is another COVID bill out, and we think we have a pretty strong argument for including some of the facets of the patient-centered bill in that bill. Distinguishing O&P, again, for the reason, if only for the reasons of telehealth, makes sense in a COVID package. This is the wrong time to say, with all the work that we're doing, that we are simply suppliers of DME. We're obviously, we have folks that are in ICUs fitting equipment and helping people. So to say that we're just suppliers, this is the wrong time to be doing it. That's an argument that's gained traction both in the House and the Senate. Again, the definition of off the shelf, minimal self-adjustment, it makes sense in this environment to restore that congressional definition. As you know, there are numerous comorbidities associated with COVID. They've led to amputations, they've led to other things which have required orthoses. Again, the wrong time to say that minimal self-adjustment is something that can involve another person as folks are being swept up into this new world of O&P. There's been situations where folks have kind of taken advantage of a lack of oversight right now on CMS. Every federal entity has their eyes on COVID. It has allowed for the bad players to crop up again. Now more than ever, it makes sense to ban drop shipping. And one facet of that's not a piece of the legislation that we want in the next COVID bill is to postpone competitive bidding for off the shelf for at least a year. There are a lot of organizations in DC that want this. This is absolutely the wrong time to have competitive bidding on the forefront. So having that as part of the next COVID package would be a big relief, not only to our members, but to many, many healthcare providers. So we're working hard on that, both with Congress and making that argument to CMS. So again, the House has done their bill, the Senate is knee deep in their bill. We have had, as you saw, Zoom meetings with Mitch McConnell, who is spearheading the efforts. We will have another one of those later this week. We've got meetings with Chuck Grassley, all of the key players to try to get this stuff included in the next COVID package. And with their, with the knowledge that that bill is going to be a lot bigger than anyone thought, I think we've got a shot at it. It's certainly some of this, certainly more so the distinguishing O&P from DME, frankly, than the rest of it. But certainly we've got an argument to make that all of this stuff should be in the next COVID relief package. When that Senate bill drops, as we are doing with the House, we need to get as many co-sponsors on the bill as possible. So you've got, for any bill, there are a number of senators, if it's on the Senate side, representatives, if it's on the House side, that come out in initial support of a bill. They're original sponsors of the bill. From there, you add co-sponsors. And the more co-sponsors you have, the more people, especially on a bipartisan basis, that you have on your bill, the better off you are. So again, we've got 10 on the House bill, which is good. We need it to be much more. So please, we'll talk about how you can get involved in just a second. But when that Senate bill drops, we'll need as many senators on there as possible, just to create awareness of the bill, get more people on board, and illustrate to the relevant committees that there's lots of bipartisan support for that bill. We would like to get a hearing. It's not entirely necessary, but a hearing in front of a committee. In this case, on the Senate side, it's the Finance Committee. As we said, on the House side, it's the Energy and Commerce Committee. Again, Anna Eshoo is chair of the subcommittee, the health subcommittee that oversees these issues. Getting a hearing allows you to talk publicly about this. It allows them to talk about the bill, the importance of the bill. It is not 100% necessary in the current political climate. It certainly doesn't hurt. So we want to try to get that done. But there are ways to get this bill across the finish line without doing that. And that is to get the legislation included in a larger end-of-year health package. Quite frankly, this is likely the way this bill is going to get done. If you were at the policy forum, the virtual policy forum we held earlier this year, you heard us say that most bills that pass don't pass on their own. In other words, we've got a bill, HR 5262, that's a standalone bill. It probably, almost definitely, frankly, won't pass that way. What will likely happen is Congress will take a whole bunch of non-controversial pieces of legislation, wrap them up into one large bill, and get that over the finish line by the end of the year. On the House side, they'll need to do something called extenders. A lot of Medicare programs, Medicaid programs end at a certain time. Most of them were going to end back in May, but they were pushed forward because of COVID, and all of them are slated to end either later in this year or at the end of the calendar year. They'll need to pass legislation, a large piece of legislation, to ensure that all of those smaller Medicare programs and Medicaid programs keep going. The most likely scenario for our bill is that it will get wrapped up and tied to one of those larger pieces of legislation. The upside of that is it gives us plenty of time to keep promoting this bill on the Hill and talking about the importance of it. It also, unfortunately, does put us up up against a bit of a wall in that, you know, we're laying the groundwork on two fronts right now. We've got to get the bill. We're trying to get the bill included in a COVID package and ensure that we are part of that end of the year legislation, which is far from even being considered yet. You know, they're working on COVID, and then they'll recess, and then they'll come back, and who knows what we'll be talking about in September. But come October, right before the election, that's when we'll start talking about that end of the year package. So that's probably the most likely way this is going to go. But the point is, we are working on this on numerous fronts, trying to get this done in a number of different ways. Let me quickly stop there to see if anybody has any questions on the Orthotics and Prosthetics Patient-Centered Care Act before we move on to our next piece of legislation.
Hey, Justin, there are no questions in the queue.
Either I'm really good or you guys just understand this stuff really well. I hope it's both. But again, any questions, anything comes up, please do let me know, email me, and I will answer those questions over email. And again, watch your emails, because when the Senate bill drops in early August, we will be reaching out for some grassroots help. Pardon me, taking a quick sip of water because I'm talking a lot. So again, if you were at Policy Forum, virtual or otherwise in previous years, you have heard about the Wounded Warrior Workforce Enhancement Act. We are looking at a 60% shortage of orthotists and prosthetists by 2025. And the current capacity at orthotics and prosthetics master's programs at schools across the country, they just don't have the capacity to train enough clinicians to meet the demand that we're going to have. So we have been working with Congress to try to find a way to solve that problem. In previous Congresses, this has been the Wounded Warrior Workforce Enhancement Act. There are bills in the House and Senate as we speak to address this issue. But frankly, that legislation has received pushback this year, as in previous years, from the VA. The VA has essentially, what the bill would do in a very, very Cliff Notes version of it is to send money to the Department of Veterans Affairs, $5 million to the Department of per year to the VA, who would then distribute that money to eligible schools, whether they have a master's program or not. So you could build an existing program or start a new program from scratch. The VA doesn't generally like money going into the door, then out the door to somebody else, federal funding, that is. So they have, from the word go, pushback on the way the legislation was constructed. So we decided to pivot to, rather than just having the legislation have a partnership with the VA, have a partnership with military hospitals. This allowed us to use, to work, instead of the Veterans Affairs committees in Congress, with the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Armed Services Committee. We have considerably more champions on those committees. Senator Duckworth is a member of the Senate Armed Services Committee. Senator Rick Scott in Florida, where there is obviously an O&P school. Senator David Perdue in Georgia, where there is an O&P school. A lot more buy-in from those senators who have schools in their states. So we created an amendment. Let me pause right there and talk about what's going on in Congress, in addition to all of the talk about the next COVID bill. Every year, Congress passes what's called the NDAA, the National Defense Authorization Act. That creates or extends every defense program in the country. It's a multi-trillion-dollar bill. It's obviously geared toward defense, but this is the Senate Armed Services Committee and the House Armed Services Committee crown jewel. This is what they spend a year creating, and then it passes, and then we have our defense programs authorized for another year. We were working on including language from Senator Richard Durbin of Illinois, who is not on that committee, but the legislation was also championed by Senator Duckworth, also of Illinois, and Senator Perdue in Georgia, to create a pilot program to assess, as you can see this on your screen, awarding grants to institutions through the Department of Defense to establish or expand their master's programs. We're going to get into a little, I'm going to see what my next slide is. We're going to get into a little bit of DC wonkiness with what happened to this bill, to this language, because this is the sort of thing that we get to deal with on a daily basis as lobbyists for AOPA. So DOD originally came out against this this language for the same reason that the VA did, which is essentially we don't have a shortfall. I'm not sure about money coming in that then goes out to another to folks that aren't DOD. I'm not sure how this is defense related. So the original language is there's a lot more than what's quoted here. Had a lot of minutia of what you could do with the money. You could expand your lab space. You could actually use it to build new space, specifically brick and mortar type buildings. You could use it to expand your curriculum. DOD took issue with all of the minutia in the bill and all of that specific language. And they pushed back, to Senate Armed Services Committee staff. And they're the ones that write this bill. They're the ones that determine whether an amendment gets in or whether it doesn't. So the Armed Services Committee came back to us, the staff came back to us and said, you know, DOD doesn't want this. Let's revisit. Let's talk about how else we can make this work. Cut to about a week later, Senator Durbin's office has been having back and forth with certain people at DOD, and DOD sends back a rewritten amendment saying, look, if you just strip out some of the specifics of this and just say that in general, it's to create or expand programs without getting into the weeds of what it is. We can't have you saying you're going to build brick and mortar buildings. We can't have you saying it's for curriculum. But if you just really strip out a lot of those specifics, we can get to a place where we agree with this, which was great. And we were very, very excited. So we ironed out, finalized the language, sent it back to committee staff. And then it became clear that Senator Durbin's staff and the Armed Services Committee staff were talking to very different people at the Department of Defense, because Armed Services Committee staff came back and said, well, DOD still opposes this. And we sent back the amendment and said, no, this is literally language that was written by DOD. They approve it. Not only do they approve it, they wrote it. They want this. And this literally brings us up to today, where there's been a back and forth between Armed Services Committee staff and Durbin staff about how this would finally get into the NDAA, because there's just been so much confusion over who's talking to who at DOD. This is the sort of thing that from a bureaucracy level will drive anybody mad. It confirms all of your worst suspicions about DC, but that is literally where we are today. They are finalizing the NDAA today or tomorrow so that they can get to the COVID package. So we're scrambling to try to get this piece of language in there. If it does get in, I realize that you would look at this and say, okay, it'll carry out a pilot program. What good does that do us if there's no money behind it? This language coming from Senator Durbin is important, because Senator Durbin is the ranking member on the Armed Services Appropriations Committee. He is the one that pulls the purse strings on this bill. In other words, if we get language in there, even if there's no money attached to it, Senator Durbin can then add money to it when it goes to the Appropriations Committee. So we will get it off, hopefully get it authorized in this bill and appropriated by Senator Durbin when they're done with their appropriations. But we've got to get it in there first. And so my phone has been blowing up as I've been talking to you from committee staff and other folks who are trying to get this done. So this has been the bane of my existence for a couple of weeks now, and I hope we get it across the finish line. I'll pause there real quick. I know that was a lot before we talk about ways you can get involved over the next month or so as we work on this.
You can keep rolling. There are no questions in the queue.
Awesome. Probably the most important part, and I hope you're asking yourself this question: what can I do? Obviously, we need your voice involved in all of these efforts. So I am the lobbyist for AOPA. I'm a registered lobbyist. I'm the voice on the Hill. I'm the one that brings your message up there. But I am not an orthotist or a prosthetist or a supplier or a manufacturer or any of these things. So I speak for you, and I hope that I do it really well, but you are the voice of experience. You're doing this on a day-to-day basis. You're working with patients. It's much, much better to have your voice involved in this. So the more you can get involved, the more you can speak up, the better off we are. The more Congress hears from you, as opposed to the folks that represent you, the better off we are. And a good way to do that is to visit aopavotes.org, which is a screenshot of which is on your screen. If you go there right now or after we're done, you can send a letter to your representatives asking them to sign on to the Patient-Centered Care Act in the House. There will definitely be another one of these alerts once we have a bill in the Senate asking your senators to sign on as well. So please do make your voice heard through AOPA Votes. It does work. These letters work. I would strongly recommend that you personalize them, talk about who you are, what you do, in your district, the folks that you see, all of that stuff. The more you personalize it, the better. They really want that personal story from their constituents. They work for you. You vote for them. You hire them. And they know that if you're disappointed with the work that they're doing, you will vote them out. So using your voice to tell them, hey, I need this piece of legislation passed. I need I need that distinguishing of OMP from DME. Your voice matters. It matters a lot in this. So please do go to AOPA Votes and send a letter if you have not done so in the past. Even if you've done so in the past, heck, send another one, because the more co-sponsors we can have, the better. August, as I said, most members of Congress are home for the August recess. This is going to be a very different August recess. Normally they're out doing town halls, going to parades, kind of being out and about in the community. I don't imagine you'll be seeing much of that this year. But as you saw earlier in my presentation, it gives them a lot of time to be on Zooms with each other, with us. And that is what passes for an in-person visit these days. What is on your screen is from a poll that was done among congressional staff. I think it was 3 years ago now, by the Congressional Management Foundation. And they said, if your boss hasn't arrived on a decision, what's the biggest thing that's going to have an influence on them? And without fail, it was in-person visits from a constituent. You taking the time to go and see them, whether it's in DC or whether it's in your home district, by far carries the most weight. You are a voting constituent. You took the time to come and make your voice heard. That is a huge, huge thing to do. And second, contact from a constituent's reps. I'm not quite sure how that's different from a visit from a lobbyist, which obviously didn't rank as high. And then those individual emails, which I mentioned in the last slide, sending those emails. So hearing from a constituent, by far the most important thing. I would love it if you would volunteer to take some time to meet with your member or your senator or their congressional staff over the August recess. I am happy to facilitate that and make it happen. Please do reach out to me. Again, my email address will be up at the end of this presentation. That is huge. They are going to be looking for stuff to do in August. They just came back from a 2-week recess for July 4th. And many legislators told me, it's just really hard to fill the hours when we're all sitting at home and all we can do is Zoom calls. So that means they have time for you. So please do consider having a chat with your member of Congress or their staff during the August recess. And again, reach out to me and we can make that happen. We have a PAC. I can't legally say a heck of a lot about it because we have rules that say you need to, laws that say you need to have been solicited to contribute before I can ask anyone to do that. But one of the reasons you see all of those photos of one-on-ones of us with the members of Congress and the senators is because we have a political action committee. We are able to help our champions get reelected. It's an important part of what we do and the work that we're able to do on the Hill. And it does increase our visibility, increases our recognition. It helps us keep our champions in Congress. We have friends, as you saw, on both sides of the aisle. We want to make sure that they stay there. Some of them are in very tough re-election battles. We want to make sure that those who have supported us in the past are able to continue to support us. We are the only PAC representing our industry on the Hill. We have numerous organizations, obviously, that we partner with on public affairs issues and on legislative issues. But we're the only PAC. We're the only ones that are representing our industry on the Hill. So please do consider looking into this a little bit more. We will have an event online if you're going to be visiting, if you're going to be doing our assembly with us. Speaking of which, I think that's my next thing. There we go, National Assembly. September 9th through 12th, please do join us. We are entirely online this year. We do have a reception for our PAC donors on Friday, which I think is the 11th, September 11th. A member of Congress, Stephen Horsford, will be visiting us for that. We were supposed to be, as folks know, in Vegas. So now that we're not in Vegas, the best thing that we could do is get the member of Congress who represents Vegas to join us for our PAC reception. So that is a part of it. But please do join us for our virtual assembly. Registration for that is open. Happy to answer any questions on that. More than likely, if you email me questions about that, I'll probably forward them on to our other staff or connect you with our other staff who run that. But please do consider joining. And our next advocacy webinar. There is a lot that's going to happen in Congress over the next 3 weeks before they go out. A lot of it dealing with us, a lot of it dealing with COVID. So please do join us for our next webinar, which is August 19th at 1 o'clock. And I hope you will join us for that one. Again, these are going to be every month. So hopefully we'll have some regulars as we build this webinar series. I don't know why that slide was there. That is me, and I will open it up one final time for questions. If anybody has any, but please do reach out to that email address with anything else you can think of.
You have several indications of gratitude in the question box. Excellent. But no direct questions for you to answer. You did a great job.
Excellent. Thank you so much, everybody, and I hope to see you next month and hopefully we'll have a lot more to talk about and then some good news. We'll have a Senate bill, I know that. So thank you, everybody, for taking the time. I appreciate it.